Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of MakerPipe Monday. If you don't know, this is a weekly showcase that we do where we basically sit down and take a look at builds that have been shared in the MakerPipe community. These are all made with EMT Conduit and MakerPipe connectors, and they're really creative, and there's all kinds of things that we can highlight within them that you can use in whatever it is that you want to make. This week, we're going to be looking at a spare tire storage rack, a studio table, a roof rack awning for a truck, a walkway grape trellis, a garden enclosure and trellis frame, and a freestanding garden enclosure. All kinds of great builds. Let's jump in and check them out. First up is the spare tire storage rack. This was shared by Prashant. Really appreciate them sharing this. This is really cool. And we can see here they've got, it looks like some kind of truck. We don't really see, actually, no, this is just a trailer. So this is a trailer that looks like it has some, modular frames on it, probably for camping. I can see the rooftop tent on there, and we can see it's pretty decked out, kind of see in the background. But this specific thing that they shared is the spare tire storage rack that bolts to the side of the trailer, as we can see here. It looks like the bottom is U-bolted to the conduit, or the bottom of the rack is kind of U-bolted to the trailer, and then there's also some straps and different things that are pulling it tight and holding it to the side. And we can see that it's holding the spare tire. If we look at this photo here, I think there's a photo, yeah. You can see the spare tire is being held up underneath it, being pulled tight to the frame, and then there's also some like jerry cans and other storage up top as well in the top part of the rack. And this is a lot of connectors in a small build. You can see a lot of T connectors, and actually, yeah, I think it's mostly T connectors. It looks like there's some bins incorporated into it. If I had to guess, they probably, because there are some of the off-the-shelf electrical couplings, I would guess that the arches here, this arch, and actually all the arches in the corners, you can get pre-bent 90s off the shelf. I think the 3/4 inch ones are like $5 or $6, kind of expensive, but it saves you from having to bend a bunch of these. And they use, 2, 4, 6, 8 of them. So that makes sense. And basically then they just, once they have that, and then they just added, used the couplings from off the shelf to add in the horizontal spans in between the arches on the sides. Then they basically just use T connectors from MakerPipe to grab on all over the place. I mean, there's T connectors everywhere, to add the cross supports, to add the top and bottom supports, for the top and bottom of the rack, and basically just anywhere they needed, which is basically just all of that, just, the top and bottom support and the ones that go from side to side. And then we can also see underneath they added some T connectors to go down, and I imagine that's the dimensions are made specifically for that spare tire. And we can see that, it was pulled tight in that picture that we looked at here. We can see that the spare tire fits in there perfectly and is secured in place. And that's awesome. Just a really cool build and really unique. We haven't really seen a lot of builds like this, if any. So this is really cool. Really appreciate you sharing this, Prashant. Awesome job. Next up is a studio table. This was shared by Inhale Exhale Studio on Instagram. This is really cool. They have been reworking their pottery studio, as we can see here, and they built this really simple workstation with MakerPipe and Conduit and just a piece of plywood, which is really cool. Looks fantastic, and it's a really simple design. And if you need a custom size workbench, you can customize the dimensions of a simple frame like this to fit your space, but still utilize this pretty basic and simple and easy to make framework. So basically, this has 6 verticals. We can see here there's 3 in the front, and then, of course, 3 in the back that we can't really see. And then it looks like there is, using T connectors, there are supports that run from the front of the frame to the back vertical. And it looks like those are just being held on with T connectors there on all 3 of these verticals. Whoops, that's a highlighter. All 3 of these verticals. And I would imagine, most likely, we can't see the back of the frame. I would recommend, if I was making this, just to add some kind of lateral support, I would recommend having cross supports here. We can't see if that's what they did or not. But if you did do cross supports, then I would use a 90-degree connector in the corners there, and then you would use a 4-way connector there, because there's 4 pipes being connected. There's the vertical, then there's the 1, 2, 3 pipes coming out of the connector. So I would use a 4-way there. That's what I would do to just give you some lateral support. And we can see the buckets are being stored underneath there, and it looks like those might be elevated on the frame, which means there probably is pipes going from side to side. So I would do that and recommend that anyway, just for some lateral support. But then at the top, we can see, I would imagine, the same kind of thing where you've got a rectangle going around. And to do that, you would just use 90-degree connectors in the corners like that. And then we can see a glimpse of a connector here in the middle. So that means either probably T connector, grabbing onto that and then going to the back. Actually, no, it'd have to be another 4-way connector in the back there because we have to account for this vertical. Sorry, hopefully this isn't too confusing. But you'd use another 4-way connector here, and then I think you'd have to use most likely another 4-way connector here to be able to connect all of that together. So that's 1, 2, 3 4-way connectors, 2, 4, 6 90-degree connectors, and then 3 T connectors. Yeah, 3 T connectors. Yeah, the ones 3 on the bottom. Okay. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing, but it really is a pretty simple design once you kind of understand those, but you're really only using 3 connectors. So once you understand those, it's really not too complicated, but really great work table and a really cool studio here. And definitely check out their Instagram. They're doing all kinds of pottery stuff and everything, which is really cool. So thanks so much for sharing this. Really appreciate it. Next up is a roof rack awning that comes from Ronald, and this is cool. He's got a nice F-150 here, and basically just added a roof rack to the truck that allows him to have an awning that deploys and sticks out. And we can see here he bolted the rack directly to the truck bed topper using the maker pipe flanges. It looks like he added some rubber or something underneath or kind of in between the flanges and the in the truck there. And then basically those are bolted there. We can see there are 6 mounting points. He used 6 adjustable angle flanges from Maker Pipe to bolt those to the roof of the bed topper. And then basically just created that rectangular frame using 90-degree connectors directly above the adjustable angle flanges. And then those verticals stick up just a little bit through the 90 all the way around. And then we can see basically just added an awning that just rests up against that pipe on this side, and then it looks like it's just Velcroed on there, or strapped on there. And then here we can see it deploys out, and it looks like he is using, I imagine, yeah, so it looks like that's just a pre-made canopy that he has, and he just basically attached that to the roof rack. So when I first saw this picture, I thought this was made out of Maker Pipe and Conduit too, but this looks like it's just a canopy that's pre-existing, pre-made, and that is just mounted to the Maker Pipe roof rack. But it really gives it a good place to store it while you're driving, as you can see there, and then it deploys out, and you got a really great awning if you're doing some camping or out at the park, whatever it might be, and you just need some shade. Then there you go, you got one. So really cool. Thanks so much, Ronald, for sharing this. We love seeing it. Next up is a Walkway Grape trellis, and this comes from Eddie, and I'm like 67% sure that we looked at this build a couple weeks ago, and I'm not sure if we looked at it before there was stuff growing on top or what, but I couldn't find which episode that was in, so I just in case, I don't want to miss it. So here we are, we're looking at it again, just in case we missed it earlier. Not sure if we did or not. I couldn't find it. Anyway, this is a really cool Walkway trellis for grapes, as we can see here. And this is grabbing onto the fence, and it looks like, I would imagine that's the top rail T connector grabbing on with, no, that's 3/4 inch conduit at the top. So maybe this is just a smaller diameter, actually, maybe that's top rail and then going down to 3/4 inch. Maybe it's just resting inside of there. I'm not sure if that's what that black mark is, if that's where the 2 pipes meet. But if this is top rail, probably use the top rail T connector to grab on and then shim down to 3/4 inch for the upper part of the frame. But we can see they've got this walkway, leading to the door in their house, and basically just built this framework. And they utilized a really great technique that I think a lot of people are probably unaware of, where you have a vertical or a horizontal, and the T connector can grab on, and you can kind of adjust the angle of that, because it's able to swivel really all the way around this through connection here. So because of that, they were able to utilize and make this really unique triangular shape that matched the shape that they were going after to be able to grab on and effectively kind of brace the whole thing by grabbing onto the verticals and then creating this shape. Now we can't really see where all of the pipes are running because it's so loaded down with grapes now, which is fantastic. I mean, look at this. You can walk underneath and you get home from work and walk inside and just grab some grapes on your way in. That's really cool. But basically, you can see the framework there is 3/4 inch EMT conduit and maker pipe connectors, and then they just ran some trellis netting or some netting back and forth. I guess that would be rope. I guess you'd say. It's kind of just going back and forth between the framework, and it's obviously doing a great job of supporting the grapevines and everything, as we can see here. And yeah, basically just use 3/4 inch EMT conduit, and it looks like all T connectors to kind of achieve these unique angles in that way I was describing, where you just grab on and then just kind of set the angle that you need, and then lock it down and secure it in place there, and then you've got that all situated and ready to go. So that's really cool. And like I said, we can't really see a ton of the framework, but it's pretty self-explanatory just using that technique with the T connectors there. Basically just have the verticals that go up, and then they just grab onto those verticals using the T connectors to achieve those different angles that they need. So really cool. Thanks so much for sharing this, Eddie. Awesome build. Next up is an enclosure and trellis frame. This comes from David, and this is really great if you need to build enclosures for your garden beds or frost protection or trellises. This is really the go-to design. This is how most people do it and how I would recommend you do it, where basically you've got your garden beds here and the verticals are secured to the garden bed. Looks like they're just buried in the soil, which it looks like pretty tall garden beds. So, with something like this, you can get away with that. Just kind of have the verticals going all the way to, the main part of the ground down here. If you can, get them down that far. And basically, then you just have your verticals, and usually we recommend every 4 to 5 feet to have a vertical. It looks like they followed that kind of, that general guideline, where basically they just created a rectangular box, and we can see they've got the horizontal pieces, and there's some up top. It's basically just mirrored on the top. And then they've got the 6 verticals. And then basically 90-degree connectors in the corners because you're joining 3 pipes together. You have the one going continuously through it, and then the one coming in, or the 2 coming in at an angle. And so that's how you make a corner connection for boxes like this. So you've got 4 90-degree connectors per side. And then you have this vertical halfway down, and basically you break up this long horizontal span with the 180-degree connector, which allows you to have the middle through connection and then the 2 pipes coming in. So they've got the 180-degree connectors there. So basically just 8 90-degree connectors and 4 180s per box, and you can basically just create this framework that you can then attach trellis netting to if you want to trellis plants inside of it. You can do frost protection. You can imagine covering this whole thing with plastic, or as we saw from David, he's got some netting around the outside to actually protect the plants from all kinds of critters, and it's secured to the frame using the plastic greenhouse clips. We have some on the website. You can also get them on Amazon and other places like that. But basically just, holding the protective mesh netting to the framework. And you could do a combination where, we've seen people build, these boxes, and then as the seasons change, they'll do frost protection in the winter, and then as they move into spring, they'll add trellising, and then they'll put enclosure material on the outside whenever, the plant's starting to grow and get bigger, and, predators or whatever is, threatening the plants. So you can really do a lot with this simple framework, and basically he's got, looks like 4 garden beds, and just use that design that we went over for all of the garden beds, and you could pretty much infinitely do that. And then you could customize the frames beyond that. If you needed to add more support, or if you needed to trellis a very specific area of the garden, you could, add another crossbar between the 2 pieces and then trellis straight down from there. A lot of customization possibilities once you get that main design and framework in place. So really cool, David. Thanks so much for sharing this. We love seeing it. Last but not least is this fantastic garden trellis, and this comes from Ted. I wish we had more pictures, but we do have this picture. And basically, just as you can see, it's a very large garden enclosure that is protecting some garden beds and some large trees that are in there. And basically, this is just like we just kind of saw, where this is a giant box where you've got the 4 verticals. Well, I guess there's more than that, but the 4 main verticals are in the corners. And it looks like those have 90-degree connectors. And we'll go back and talk about the connectors in a second. But there are also these verticals in the middle. Like I said, we usually recommend every 4 to 5 feet. So following that's pretty good, pretty good base guideline to start with. And is that another vertical? No, that's a part of the gate in the back. So what is that? 3, 6, 9 verticals total. And it looks like in the corners, pretty standard 90-degree connectors to make the corner connection in all 4 corners, or I guess all 8 corners technically, because you got these down here. And then it looks like those other verticals are connected with T connectors going down. It looks like this is made out of 1/2-inch conduit because I can see some shims in there. Maybe that's a good technique. I'm not sure if that's what they did. I can't really tell. But sometimes you can build like a main framework out of 3/4-inch EMT, and then the 3/4-inch connectors can shim down to 1/2-inch using the adapter that we sell. And so that's a good way to kind of save some money on conduit if you add a main 3/4-inch frame and then add bracing to that with 1/2-inch. Looks like that's what they did here. And then we also see another T connector here and then another 90-degree connector to add the support to the door here. And then we can also see some 45-degree bracing using the 45-degree connector from MakerPipe, just to add some bracing here. It looks like they only did it in that one spot for some reason. But that's another thing, too. You can always add more bracing. If you build the main structure and find that it needs more bracing in a specific area, go back and you can add some with angled bracing or with T connectors, or even add a vertical. It's a little bit more involved because you might have to, break up a span, but you can still do it pretty easily. And then here we can see they've got the T connector holding on this vertical as well, and we'll make that blue just so it matches. And then we can see here they've got a gate, and we can't really see how the gate is attached, but it looks like just your standard rectangular door, and it opens and closes, so you still have the vertical here next to the actual pipes in the door that make up the gate. And then we can see here it looks like it's attached using maybe the hinges that we've talked a lot about, the aluminum snap-on hinges. They're made for PVC, but you can use them on EMT conduit, and they work pretty well. I like recommending those. We also carry on the website the hinges that Billy from Northwoods Engineered prints and sells, and we carry those now, which is really cool. So you could use those, but pretty standard practice to just have the verticals right next to the door, and then you just use hinges to secure the door to those verticals. And then to make a latch, we sell the one from Billy that he prints. Then we also did a video roundup of like 8 different ways that you can make different ones, so check that out if you're interested as well. But pretty standard. You have your enclosure, and then you've got the hardware cloth attached to it, most likely with zip ties, I would guess. And then you're kind of done there. We can see it's pretty tall, so there's no roof on it. Must not be worried about birds. Must be, like ground animals that we're worried about. But you could also add a roof to this if you needed to, just with some crossbars and then putting some mesh or some hardware cloth on top as well. But really great build, and all of these builds are fantastic. If you want to see any of them in more detail, they'll be linked down below. You can check out the photos specifically or the post, or ask any questions if you have any. You can also leave a comment down below if you have any questions. If you enjoyed this, leave a like and consider subscribing. Post videos like this every week, and we really appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. We'll see you in the next one.